Welcome to the first ever workshop held by Brotman Consulting Group. I'm Eric Brotman, the president of Brotman Consulting Group, and I'm here with Jessica Rhodes, who is not only an amazing influencer, but is the superstar in the podcast world and knows it better than anybody I know. So before we dive in, first there's the legalese on our screen. We can skip straight over. And Jess, why don't you introduce yourself, because not everybody here knows you, and then we'll get started from there.
Yeah, I am the founder and president of Interview Connections. We are an award-winning, multiple seven-figure podcast guest booking agency, and we help entrepreneurs and business owners transform their business through visibility and strategy. And we do that through the podcasting strategy. We get people booked on podcasts, and we give them all the support and strategy to monetize their visibility.
Well, I'm glad you're here. We have Sarah Losi behind the scenes flipping slides for us. So if you would go ahead and do that, let's dive right in. And one of the things that's near and dear to me as a financial advisor is wanting to be more than just an authority on the subject, and it's to be an influencer in this space. I think once you have your credentials and your licensing and you've built a practice as a financial advisor, or really any professional, you're an authority in your space. You know it better than certainly the public, and that will lead to customers or clients or what have you. But to be an influencer is a different animal. To be an influencer requires you to develop a voice, develop a message, develop a following, and be able to influence decisions for folks beyond what is just your practice, because we only have so many hours in the day to visit with so many families. At some point, you also want to have some additional outreach. So to me, being an influencer means changing the industry. It means changing the way financial literacy is taught. It means changing the way financial education is brought to the public. And it means hopefully helping more families than I could ever possibly meet. Jess, what do you feel it means to be an influencer?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything you said. And when I think of someone that's an influencer, I think of somebody that when they speak or when they recommend something or when they advise something, people do it without really questioning, like, maybe I'll get a second opinion. They're like, if Eric says to do this, I'm doing this. If Jessica says to get this microphone, I'm getting it. Like an influencer is somebody that has a high level of trust with the people that they are leading.
It's funny, that's how I got this microphone.
Yeah.
You sent me a link to Amazon and I owned it within 4 seconds, I think. So that good stuff. Sarah, why don't we flip over and go to the next question and give Jess first crack?
And I can't see the slides, so.
Oh, you can't? Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know why you can't see the slides, but the question is, what is a podcast?
Thank you.
We wanted to give you a really difficult one you can't see the slideshow?
No, I am not familiar with this software, so I was like, I'm just hoping someone tells me the question.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is going well so far. No.
You know what? It's really important to just always stay on your toes when you're podcasting. That's lesson number one.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you fessed up. Otherwise, this would have been wildly interesting. So what is a podcast? There's people out there who don't know. I know 3 years ago I didn't. So how would you define that?
A podcast by definition, it's an audio show that people get through an RSS feed. And don't ask me what RSS stands for because I don't remember, but you don't need to know either. So essentially people record their audio, they put it onto iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and people can subscribe in all different types of podcast apps. That's a podcast. Now there are so many different formats and styles and lengths and all of that. They're all podcasts, right? So there's just different types of podcasts and there's different approaches that different people make with their podcast, but it's an audio show. That's it. Audio show on demand.
It's funny. I had no idea what a podcast was when you and I met.
Yeah.
So this goes back 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I can't believe it's been three. But I didn't know what a podcast was, and I met you at a conference, and you were saying, "Have you ever guested on podcasts?" And you might as well have said something in Greek. I didn't know what you were talking about, and I had to learn what this medium was and how it could benefit my business as a financial advisor, but also the businesses of those for whom we're consulting. So to me, a podcast, I mean, you nailed what it is in terms of it being an audio show that's got a permanent shelf life.
Right.
To me, it's also a means to reaching influencer status. It is a spectacular and very manageable and affordable, and we're going to talk about that, but a manageable and affordable way to reach a very broad audience, but not so broad that it's just the masses. You reach a broad audience, but it's those people who have specific interest in your topic. And because there are a million podcasts, it's not like, it's not like television where there's only 800 channels. Remember when it was
Right.
three? You don't, you're too young. But there were three channels. Now there's 800, but there's a million podcasts, which means there's so many different ways to get your voice out there, and there's so many audiences to tap. So that I consider a podcast to be a medium for expression and for building influence. So
Yeah.
Sarah, would you flip over? Um, the next question, Jess, for those of you, everyone else is watching the slideshow, I think, is can podcasting bring in clients? And I'll take this first, and then I know you can tee this up in a broad way. Um, the short answer is absolutely yes. We have absolutely seen, not only from being a guest on podcasts, but then from creating and starting Don't Retire, Graduate, the backdrop for which is behind me. The show that now I'm hosting in its third year has created an audience. It's created a following. It's a really simple and wonderful way for people to get to know me and to get to know what our firm does and what we stand for and what we believe in a non-threatening way, where folks don't have to necessarily take the action of making a phone call or scheduling an appointment or talking about money, because sometimes that's uncomfortable for people, especially if they don't know you. So I can absolutely say that guesting on podcasts and hosting podcasts have created clients for BFG Financial Advisors, and it has been a successful part of our business development strategy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Obviously, podcasting can bring you new clients. And I want to just share, how a little bit about how it does that. It's a content marketing strategy and it's an influencer building strategy, right? It's you're getting new clients by providing valuable content, by increasing your influence and getting in front of new audiences. So when you're hosting your own show, you are now building an audience of your fans, people that are getting to know you. And when you're a guest on other shows, you're getting in front of new audiences. So what will typically happen is somebody hears you as a guest on somebody else's show, they like you, they then start following you, then they listen to your podcast. So they're being nurtured by you, they're being warmed up, you're educating them. They're building a relationship with you without you really even knowing it, because a lot of times people follow you for a long time before actually reaching out and saying, hey, I'm really interested in talking to you about how you can support me, how you can manage my wealth, how you can do XYZ. So you're really increasing your influence, and it's a long-term strategy. It's not like running ads where you run ads and then boom, people reach out and say they want to work with you. It's authority building. It's truly growing a really strong foundation for your business that you can reap the rewards for years and years after you do podcasting.
So now that we've decided it can bring in clients, the next slide, which you can't see, I could ask you anything I want right now.
You really can. I
I feel
mean,
very, I could ask you what color the sky is in Rhode Island right now, but I won't. The question is, should I be a guest or create my own show?
yeah. So both is truly the answer, right? You want to do both. And I forget, Eric, did you start your show at the same time that you were a guest, or did you do the show
No,
a
no,
year
I
later?
I guested first
Yeah. Yeah.
because I didn't know how they worked and I wanted to get some exposure. So I guested on about 20 shows before I launched, and was able to learn the difference between really terrific prepared hosts and hosts who were maybe winging it, and
Hmm.
the difference in sound quality, production value, editing, promotion. I mean, I really sort of learned how to do it, and I'm certain I took some lumps along the way as a guest, and I had to learn what it meant to be a good guest. But let me not
Yeah.
steal your thunder in terms of the
Yeah.
chicken and the egg, which comes first.
Yeah, so I mean, the answer is you want to do both, right? The great power of podcasting comes from being a host, having your own show, and being a guest. Now, as Eric just shared, being a guest first is typically what I advise, because hosting your own show is a lot of work, quite frankly. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of unknowns, right? What microphone do I get? How long should it be? What do I ask? Where do I find the guest? How do I edit it? There's like a lot. Whereas being a guest, you get booked, you show up, you provide value, and then you get new followers and clients and leads. So being a guest first is typically what I recommend. The only time that I don't recommend being a guest first is if you're in a business that is so incredibly niche where there aren't enough podcasts for you to speak on where you'd be in front of your target audience. Then that says, oh, you need to create the show that you wish you could be a guest on and kind of be that pioneer.
Well, fortunately, personal finance is not
Right.
something that, yeah, personal
There's lots of
finance.
shows for you.
There are lots of shows, there are lots of books, there's lots of, I mean, everybody and their sister-in-law has their own financial book on those kinds of things. But I will say that I started as a guest, and it was your advice at the time. I started as a guest, I learned how to do this, and then decided to create a show.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, though I don't want this to be an infomercial, your company and you specifically helped me through the creation of the show,
Mhm.
everything down to which mic to get, which I'm still using and is, I hope, terrific. And uh, how to do this. Like I literally had no idea what it was or how to do it, and now I do it routinely, and am not only gaining acumen and gaining influence and creating new business for our firm, but I'm also having a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
this is fun. I mean, when you go to work and you get to talk to amazing people all day and interview them, or you get to guest on someone else's show and get to know these are people I might never, in fact, wouldn't have ever met. I have been
Mhm.
on multiple shows around the world.
Yeah.
Apparently, the folks in Australia like my accent. This is a true story.
Really?
Yes, I now have been asked back by a podcast slash television show in Australia, and the host said, the ladies like your voice,
That's
which
amazing.
I guess I have an accent. I thought they did. But nonetheless, let's move on to the next question. Um, and the next question is, do I need to be a technical wizard? This is
Mm.
the easiest question ever because the answer is no.
Yeah.
This is mostly a set it and forget it. Now, if you want to edit your own and you want to do the sound quality and all those things, yes. But there are people you can hire who, quite
Mhm.
frankly, are very affordable. And you introduced us to one group, and I had a chance to get to work with them, and now they produce 3 different shows for us, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I don't know how this works. I don't know the difference between Stitcher and iTunes. I and I don't want to know. In the same way, I don't want to know what RSS stands for or what the specs are on this microphone. I do not care. I want to be in a position where I can sit down at the mic, knowing who my guest is, having sort of the one sheet, which we can talk a little bit about in terms of preparation.
Mhm.
But how this works, I don't have the first clue. And I tell financial advisors all the time, don't be a podcaster. Be a financial advisor with a podcast. Don't quit your day job. We're not going to make more money
Mhm.
podcasting than we are as financial advisors. We're not trying to to change careers. We're trying to use this as a tool to grow our financial planning practice, not to quit what we're doing just to become a radio host of some kind. That's just not the answer. So, how do you feel? I don't know if you feel any differently about the technical
Yeah.
stuff. Do you have some clients who do this themselves, who do the technical stuff themselves?
Yes, I do know entrepreneurs that will do the technical stuff themselves. And here's the thing, you either have to be a technical wizard or you have to be good at delegating. It's kind of one or the other. But most entrepreneurs are not technical wizards. They're good at what they do. And I would say even if you are a technical wizard, just delegate it. Like that's always my recommendation, right? I could figure out how to edit audio. Like I could figure it out, but is that the highest and best use of my time? Like is that where I'm going to make the most money? No, it makes the most sense to delegate it to somebody that's going to make your show sound really, really good. Um, so definitely delegate it. There's so many people out there. You just got to kind of make the decision. Find the expert, hire them.
All right. Well, now I'm going to ask. There are several questions that I know people who have never used this media or have only used it a little bit are thinking. There's 2 I can think of that are the $1 million questions, and so the next one's yours first, because why not? And the question, Sarah, if you'd flip it, the question is, how can podcast guesting be monetized? This is the
Mhm.
$1 million question, so that this doesn't become just a hobby. It becomes a
Yeah.
means to an end in various different ways. So,
Yeah.
how can guesting on podcasts be monetized?
Yeah. So there are four main strategies for monetizing your guesting So for monetizing your guesting. So the strategy number one is the host relationship. So when you're a guest on a podcast, the host of that show is typically a business owner, they're an entrepreneur. They are somebody that could be your client. And that's how the strategy works, right? You want to be interviewed on podcasts where the host is a valuable connection for you. They could be your client, they could refer clients to you. So that's number one, is the relationship with the host. I mean, we have so many of our clients at Interview Connections are hosts who interviewed me or Margie before they became a client, right? And we hear that from our clients all the time. They get interviewed, and at the end of the interview, the recording turns off, and the host says, "Oh, like, how can I work with you? You sound like you have exactly what I need." I mean, hosts tell me they just basically go shopping when they're podcasting. They're like, "Who am I going to hire next? Let me interview them on my podcast and see if we hit it off."
That's great. No,
Yeah.
and so that's strategy number one. What are
Yep.
the others?
So the others are visibility to a new audience. And this is typically what people think of first, right? I'm going to get exposure to a new audience. And so with this, you want to share your story, provide value, and give a strong call to action. So if you are on a podcast with, let's say conservatively, you have 200 people listening that are all in your target market, you give great value, you share compelling stories, they now feel like they are connected to you, they like you, they trust you. You say, go to my website and book a free consultation call. I'll send you a copy of my book for free, and we'll have a talk and help you have a breakthrough in XYZ area. And then the percentage of the audience does that, you talk to them, and then you close people from that audience. So that's how you can turn your visibility into clients. And then the third way is repurposing the content that is created for you. So much content is created for you when you're a guest on a podcast, right? You know, Eric, like coming up with your own podcast, you got to figure out like who you're going to interview, what questions you're going to ask them. Like you're creating that content. But when you're a guest, you show up, they ask you the questions, you answer them, which is all in your head because it's your expertise. And then you can re-listen back to those interviews and get, 20 different quotes for social media. You can transcribe answers into a whole blog post. Like there's so much content that is created for you that you can then repurpose and put onto your platform. And then the fourth strategy is increasing your social proof and positioning. So I like to ask people, when I'm doing master classes, where is your social proof on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Meaning social proof, like are people going to refer you? Do they know who you are? Are you the first person that people think of when they're recommending somebody that does what you do? And typically people say probably 1. Nobody knows who I am unless they're my clients. So when you're a guest on podcasts, people then start referring people to you because they're like, oh yeah, I heard someone on a podcast, they do this. You should go talk to them. Right? Your positioning, your social proof goes up. When your positioning and social proof goes up, you can now charge a lot more for what you do because you're now in demand.
I think those are 4 phenomenal ways to do this as a guest. And I can say that having guested now probably on, gosh, I'll bet almost 100 shows over the last 3 years. Having guested on lots of shows, a lot of them, some of them go viral and create, and you really do need a good call to action. So if you're a financial advisor and you're looking to monetize this guesting process, having a call to action for us was making sure that we had an ebook, something that was free and valuable that people would want, and we could give an address to that. So we created a landing page. And the first one we did, we've got several now, but the first one we did was just on ways to pay less in income taxes, because I've yet to know somebody who goes, I'd like to pay more.
Yeah.
And so we created lowtaxbook.com, and it became this landing page where we could send folks where they'd remember it, because a lot of people are listening in transit. They're listening on their walking through an airport. They're listening driving in the car. And COVID has certainly changed some of that. But ultimately, a lot of times you're listening in a spot where you're not going to write down necessarily a website address.
Yep.
So it needs to be something that's easy, something that's concrete, and something that's memorable. Low tax book is not hard to remember.
Right. And
that's
really, really key, because a lot of people, their website is their name or, their last name or whatever. And it's so hard to spell, right? And you want to make sure that the URL of your call to action is something that people aren't going to misspell, because over 50% of podcast listeners are on mobile. So they're not sitting at their computer ready to type out. They're going to just remember it.
So let's move on to the next question, and I'll take the first stab at it. And the question is, how do I choose my topics? And
Mhm.
so, um, this is different as a guest and as a host, certainly, because with a host, you're going to have a whole slew of different kinds of guests, and you're going to tailor some of what you're talking about to that. So we can talk about that. But in terms of guesting, for a financial advisor anyway, I think it's important to have a specific set of memorable talking points. And so for me, the topic could be promoting a new book or promoting a new service. It could be a specific niche. If you're doing work with physicians and you go on a medical podcast of some kind and talk about finance for doctors, you want to tailor the message to the audience you're going to have. The topics, to me, the topics sort of became this quest for the right message, and so "Don't Retire, Graduate" became a larger calling than just "We do financial planning and wealth management." Well, yeah, so do 30,000 other people in the U.S. But what we did do was we created something unique that people would remember, that would raise an eyebrow and have somebody say, "Tell me more." And that created enough interest that someone would at least listen. And then for our show, when I started to host it, I've had guests on who are successfully retired. And by retired, I mean they've graduated into the next phase of their busy lives and they're doing what they love.
Mhm.
Um, and they tell their stories. We've had guests on who are 80 years old and starting businesses. It's amazing. We've had guests on who talk about all the different aspects of recreating, revisiting who you want to be when you grow up. I
Mhm.
love asking that. I ask almost every guest on the show, what do you want to be when you grow up? And if they've never listened to the show, it's going to catch them off guard,
Yeah.
because they haven't been asked that since they were 7 years old.
Right.
So just coming up with something, and then we wanted to use a school theme. So
Mhm.
we know nobody likes homework. I have a daughter going into sixth grade who does not like homework, but she'll do extra credit generally. So we do an extra credit assignment, and I ask every guest, and I tee it up so they know it's coming. I ask every guest to give us an extra credit assignment, which is that one takeaway, the one thing people can do. And whether it's their CTA, their call to action, or whether it's just the next step in whatever we wanted to talk about, it allows for this memorable moment that can be captured at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So part of choosing the topics for the first season came while I was sitting across a conference table from you.
Mhm.
And it's because we scripted out the first season and said, we want to do these things. So how did I choose my topics? I met Jess and said, what do I do? So why don't you talk a little bit about how
Yeah.
you help clients figure that out? Because it's not always easy.
Yeah, well, the first step is knowing who are you speaking to, right? Who is your target audience? And you've really indicated that as you were sharing, Eric, like you know who your target audience is, and you really understand not just who they are at a demographic level and like what do they do for work and what's their income level and all that, but it's like who are they at a psychographic level? Like what do they value, right? These are like you know that your audience, you're not speaking to people that want to just like stop working and then just sit around. Like you're speaking to people that have a purpose in life and it doesn't end when they retire from their career. So you get the mindset and like who that person is. That is step one. If you don't know that, it's really hard to choose what topics to speak to them about. So knowing who your audience is, again, demographic and psychographic level, and then you have to not only look at who they are and what they want to learn about, but what do you want to teach them? Because my target audience, there's stuff that they want to learn about that I don't want to talk about. So it has to align, right? You have to be speaking to the audience about what they want. And it has to be stuff that you're really passionate about, delivering on. So what lights you up? Because in podcasting, I mean, let's face it, in anything, people can smell from like a mile away if you're just not into it. Like if you just don't want to talk about it and you're like really bored, oof, people are going to turn that podcast off so fast. So it has to be topics that you feel like someone that could ask you one question and you could go talk for 2 hours about that one topic. Like that's kind of my baseline.
My wife would say I could talk about anything for 2 hours, but
You can I mean, that's why you have 3 podcasts, right?
maybe because I'm not sure what I want to talk about every day. Well, that's helpful. So let me ask you the next question, which is, how can your appearances be promoted? You mentioned a little bit about some of the incredible collateral that comes out of this and some of the deliverables, but
Mhm.
how do you promote this, and how can you help as a guest specifically a
Mhm.
host to promote you? Like, what do you have to
Yeah.
do so a host says, I have to promote this show?
Yeah, so it all starts like as soon as you make that connection, with the guest, with the host, like as soon as that connection starts, that's the start of a relationship. And so, it's as little as like when you get introduced to someone for an interview, thank you so much! Exclamation point. You know what I mean? I'm so excited to be on your show. Really showing your gratitude and excitement from the moment you get that connection. That's when a host starts saying, am I excited to interview and promote this person? Right? Like we've connected clients where they're just like, thank you, period. And I'm just like, could show a little excitement. You know what I mean? Like the
Where's the gratitude, man? Come on.
like because this is like remember like podcasting is like the fun part of your job, it's the fun part of marketing, it's
Yeah.
the fun part of business. So really showing that energy and excitement, that's when a host is like, oh, I can't wait to promote this person and get them out there. And then it's the things that you actually do, right? It's listening to their podcast, leaving a rating and review, posting about it on social media. So there's actually like the how do you promote it and post about it, which, post about it on social media, like what, say that you're getting interviewed, tag the host, all of that. But it's really like the stuff that you're doing behind the scenes that is almost equal to or more important. Like if somebody, let's just say somebody gets booked on a show and they're just like, okay, thanks, I'll get it scheduled, like no enthusiasm at all. And then they're posting about it. The host is going to be grateful that they're promoting it. But it's also sort of like, are you excited to be on the show? I don't really know. So show that excitement, show that gratitude, post about it, listen to the show, just like be the person at the party that everyone just like wants to be around. Like that's how you should approach podcasting because that's the person that everyone wants to promote and talk to.
None of us have been to a party in over a year. So I don't remember how to do that exactly.
Pretend you are that person. This is
Yep.
your chance to be that person.
I get to be at a party again. Okay. So for me, what I've learned in 3 years, and what we can certainly help, not only the folks watching today, but also the folks who are contemplating using your services for guesting or creating podcasts, or using our services for consulting to grow their financial firms, is that to be a great guest, it's really important not only to research your host. I mean, know who you're going to be talking to, listen to an episode or two. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I will tell you that if you get on the phone, or on the Skype or on the Zoom or whatever the format is, and one of the first things you tell the host before you go live is, listen, I listened to your episode with so and so and thought it was great, and I love the way you did X.
Mm-hmm.
The instant connection and credibility is there. Now you can't fake it. You have to actually listen to it, and you have to be
Yeah.
sincerely interested in what it is. And if
Yeah.
you thought it was terrible, you may not want to tell them. Find a different episode. Um, but if you can make the host look terrific, at
Yes.
the end of a show, I'll typically say to the host, "Did you get what you wanted out of this?" Because if you make the host look good, you make the host
Mhm.
sound terrific, and you make the host excited to promote his or her show, they will promote the world out of it. If you're a dud of a guest, or if you're
Mhm.
stealing their thunder, or if it's, heaven forbid, confrontational or something, it might never see the light of day. I
Mhm.
remember as a host, we've had guests where it's like pulling teeth to get something out of them, and you really do the best you can, but the show isn't great. You
Yeah.
really need both people to be on their game at the time, and so finding the right guests matters as much as finding the right shows and the right
Yes.
topics.
It's so true. That chemistry of the two people is everything because, I mean, my company's been responsible for booking thousands of interviews. And, sometimes there's a great guest and a great host, and the chemistry just wasn't there. I'm like, neither of you is wrong. Neither of you is bad at what you do, but there just like wasn't a match. It wasn't a love connection.
So this is eHarmony for podcasting, is what your company really is, right? We give you a profile, they
It
give you a
really
profile,
is
and you're
like,
like, I'll put you two together.
it really is personality matching. And that's why like our booking agents, they get to know their clients so much. We've made connections where we say to the client, like, okay, I know face value, you look at the show, it might not feel like a fit. Trust me, you're gonna love that host. And we've seen the host and the guest like become best friends. We're like, see, I knew it. I just had to bring you two together.
I've interviewed some of the most fascinating people, authors of great books. Like, to me, the word budget is the B word. And
Yeah.
I don't like to use it because people hate budgeting. But I interviewed a guy who I believe your office introduced me to, who wrote a book called Budgeting Doesn't Have to Suck. And in and of itself, it created instant connection because I said to him at the beginning of the show, I said, yes, it does, prove me wrong, and that kind of thing. And we just had some fun with it. And in the end, I'm not sure he convinced me entirely, but he was certainly compelling.
That's great.
But my point is that if you're authentic, there's
Mhm.
nothing more important than being authentic. You cannot fake this. You cannot fake enthusiasm. You cannot
Mhm.
fake sincerity. You cannot fake it. You have to really like what you're doing, and you have to really want to meet and talk to other people and to hear their experiences. And you want as many stories as you can. Stories are
Yep.
the fun part. I did a talk at FinCon 2019, and which is on our website, and I'll share it with everyone because it talks a lot about this topic about how to go from being an authority to being an influencer. And the piece that got the best audience reaction were mostly self-deprecation and humor. The spots where I admitted to having no idea what I was doing made everybody feel okay. Like, this isn't somebody who's going to tell us we're doing it wrong, or that he's got it all figured out, because I assure you I don't. And
Yep.
it was nice. So let's go to the next question. We talked about, can you make money doing this? Now let's talk about how much time does it take? What is the time commitment?
Yep.
And I think, at least from my perspective, that begins with deciding which roles you're going to play. The
Mhm.
time commitment for guesting is incredibly modest.
Right.
You pick one or two or three shows a month or whatever it is, and you spend a little while listening to one of the episodes, and then you do the recording, and that's basically it. And ideally, you do some posting afterwards. So the time commitment there is quite small. If you're going to have your own show, the time commitment's larger. If you're
Mhm.
going to be the technical expert, it's a lot larger, which is why that's not something I wanted to do. But I'm now at the point where I know I'm going to record 4 shows in a day. I know that I'm going to have the one sheets and the bios and know who I'm talking about in advance. I know that I'm going to sort of rip through it and have some fun with it. And I built a little studio, and this was not expensive. All the equipment I needed to do this was like $600. So we're not talking about a $10,000 recording studio. But I built a little space where I would go, and it would be set up and ready for me, so I could
Mhm.
show up and be ready to go. And I hired and outsourced the technical people and some of the guesting services and all those kinds of things, so that my time commitment felt very manageable.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
at least from my standpoint, and I'll remind people, if you want to be a financial advisor with a podcast, that's great. If you want to suddenly be a podcaster, you're probably doing it wrong. The time commitment doesn't have to be significant, in my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. It does not have to be a significant time commitment. Now, if you're guesting and you're doing it, a show a week, which is what we recommend, you want to be consistent. Like this is part of your weekly marketing plan. I would say an hour a week, maybe an hour and a half, depending on how long the show is. I've done interviews that are 20 minutes, you're in and out 20 minutes, and I've done shows that are 45 minutes to an hour if it's a host that kind of deep dives into a longer conversation. And so I add in that hour and a half to say, there you want to be listening to the podcast that you're a guest on, and you could do that while you're doing other things. Typically I'll turn it on when I'm getting ready in the morning, or if I'm going through emails, I'll just click play so I can kind of listen as I work and just sort of get to know the host a little bit. But really, I would say an hour a week if you're guesting, and then hosting, it's sort of the same as long as you're, maybe a little bit longer, like an hour and a half. If I outsource everything with like editing and the promoting and everything, but it just takes a second to kind of put it all together, email it to the right people, make sure everything's happening. But couple hours a week if you're doing hosting and guesting. And if that feels like a lot to people, I'll just say, with you know what is the saying, like great risk, great reward. Like this is a strategy that produces a
We're in
you're
the
like,
investment business.
wrong
You don't say
saying.
that.
Oh yeah, I'm in the wrong
we,
industry to say
we,
that.
we, we don't say that kind of stuff because sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not.
Okay, let me rewind. you know
I
Investing
know
in a
what you mean.
strategy like podcasting, you know it brings so much to your business, but it does take your attention. It doesn't take hours and hours and hours of time, but it does take focused attention.
I like to consider that part of the GIGO effect. the
Yeah.
garbage in, garbage out. You
Yeah.
will get out of this what you put into it.
I love that.
So let's go with that
Okay.
rather than creating a risk reward chart that's going to get stuck in compliance for 6 weeks.
Oh yeah,
You know,
don't do
and
that.
well, I've been asked, and there's a lot of good Q&A in the webinar or the public speaking appearance that's on our website about
Hmm.
compliance issues and how it works. And financial advisors a lot of times are very frightened by what they can or can't say, or what they can or can't
Hmm.
do, or is something going to be allowable. And what I tell people is that if you avoid the same third rail that you would avoid in any other medium, you're fine. If you go on live TV and start touting some product, you're done for.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if what you're talking about is strategy and it's general and it's not specific advice and it's not specific to an investment vehicle or something,
Hmm.
generally you're going to be fine, because it is truly not something that's going to get caught in that web that leads you down a bad path. So,
Yeah.
in terms of what it's going to cost, this is
Hmm.
next,
Hmm.
because now everybody's sitting here thinking, oh man, this is a lot. I got to hire all these people. I got to build all this stuff. I already said the microphone, the equipment was inexpensive,
Hmm.
and it was here in like a day.
Yeah.
Um, but what would it cost for someone just to begin? Um, let's say that somebody wanted to begin as guesting,
Hmm.
and they wanted to begin by doing a couple of shows a month or whatever. What is the financial commitment that goes with the time commitment?
Yeah. Well, it depends if you're working with us or if you're doing it, in-house. I mean, it could be anywhere from, there are some people that like they can send out a couple emails, they're connected with a lot of hosts and they can get themselves, sort of going. And that's great. Just sort of doing it yourself to kind of get off the ground and get your feet wet and start having some conversations. You could start for free. Working with an agency like ours will be, anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a month, kind of depending on like when you start working with us, and we work with clients long term, so we're also helping you with like the strategy and everything that goes into monetizing. So again, it can be anywhere from free doing it yourself to working with a company like ours to get it all done for you.
I think anytime you're talking to financial people, there's going to be a question about ROI.
Sure.
And we've talked about monetizing, we've talked about we've talked about time commitments. Now we've talked about dollars. When looking to do this, um, most financial advisors have revenues that recur,
Mm-hmm.
because the client relationships, much like you want to have a long-term relationship with
Mm-hmm.
your clients, financial advisors typically are not transactional, thankfully. It's a relationship, and it can go on for many, many years, and you grow with your clients in lots of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, if you're able to monetize the podcast, whether as a guest or a host, by enough
Mm-hmm.
that the recurring revenue covers your annual expenditures, then it's essentially the sunk cost is finished. And at that point, it's just gravy. It's just now it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that this additional revenue that's been created by the company, and it doesn't have to be financial, it could be any industry, but
Mm-hmm.
the revenue that's been created by this that's recurring is now covering the ongoing cost for this, and the rest of it is profitability,
Yep.
and that's exponential, and that's been our experience. So,
Yep.
for people who want to do this themselves, I'm sure there are plenty of stories where that's been successful. I
Mm-hmm.
would sooner do my own dental procedure,
Yeah.
but that's just me. So in terms of cost, I would say that in the very first year, not
Mm-hmm.
only did we cover the cost of working with you specifically, but we covered it to the tune of close to 400%.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's normal, but I will say that having the right strategy, the right content, the right placement, some of the right
Mm-hmm.
coaching
Yeah.
made a difference. Now, some people may also be asking, well, this is just the podcast piece. What if we wanted to do some consulting, some coaching with Brotman Consulting Group, and what does that look like? And we have two different levels for clients as well, and they range from $1,000 to $2,000 a month as well. And so that's for all the types of things that we do, not just the marketing and business development and other ends. So we're priced comparably. And
Mm-hmm.
then the question is, where do these business owners, these financial advisors specifically, but business owners want to go to get coaching and consulting and maybe some training for their people and all those other things? So how do you get started? And I will do my best to tackle that. And this is the last. This is the last question on our deck that you can't see, and And then I think we may have some questions from our audience, which is wonderful, and Sarah's gonna gather those and share them with us. But how do I get started? And the answer really is, I think it's how do I get started with Brotman Consulting Group, and also how
Yeah.
do I get started with Interview Connections? And so I'll just say that to become a client of Brotman Consulting Group, it begins with a conversation that we'd have. It would be a Zoom or a phone call. I will share the various types of deliverables and services that we provide. We're helping other financial advisors amplify their practices. And so I consider podcasting a path to influence. It is certainly not the only thing that we do. We thought you'd be a great first guest for the workshop, and I know that to be true already, and I knew it before we started. But there are other things that can make a difference, whether it's mergers and acquisitions, whether it's succession plans, whether it's rewarding key employees, or how to grow a firm. And what I find is that so many financial advisors came into our business to be financial advisors, and what they suddenly found themselves doing is being business owners. And none of us necessarily, and I speak from absolute experience, none of us were trained for that. We had the licensure and the training to do financial advice. We were not necessarily trained or even to be entrepreneurial. And so what we are trying to bring to the table is ways for folks to amplify their practices. And we've had a wonderful success at doing that. So that's how folks would get started with us. Tell us about Interview Connections. How would someone get started with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, the same. It's a conversation because, whenever you're investing in something like, working with Brotman, Financial Group or with Interview Connections, where you're really investing, this isn't like a little transactional, like, course that you're buying, like you're really investing in someone that's going to help you amplify and grow to the next level. It does have to start with a conversation. We want to make sure that we fully understand you and your business and your goals, and that we're fully confident that we're going to take you where you want to go. So I would invite everyone to go to our website to apply for a consultation call so that me or my team can hop on a conversation with you and really explore what are your goals, what do you want to achieve, and how podcast guesting can help you get there. So if you go to interviewconnections.com, there's a big old button that says chat with our team. Just, click that and fill out that form, and then, we'll get a call scheduled.
Well, Jess, you don't know this, but your name and email address and website are on the
Oh,
screen for people who want to see it.
amazing.
See how all you had to do is say it, and it magically appeared. Mine is too. And by the way, we both broke some kind of rule by having email addresses that were too long to put side by side on a webinar. So shame on both of us. But BrotmanConsultingGroup.com is a spot to go, and there's on the very homepage. There is a video, which was the talk that I did at FinCon about building influence and about this process and everything from podcasting to publishing and writing and just trying to amplify a practice. Jess, Interview Connections has been a total home run for us. I've loved working with you guys for 3+ years, and your master classes are awesome, and people can check them out, and they're free, and they're all over Facebook. If you're on
Yeah.
Facebook and you haven't seen Jess, then you're like the only one
You
of
probably
3
will now
people.
because we're
You're
on,
one of
you know what I mean?
you're one of 3 people who has never seen that masterclass. But Sarah, do we have questions from our group?
We do. So the first question, this is going to be for Eric. What has been the most rewarding experience with podcasting for you?
The most rewarding experience, I would say, has been some of the feedback that we've gotten from people who have listened to the show, especially those folks. And this sounds a little bit strange, maybe, but especially those folks who not necessarily are right to be clients for our firm, but gained something and took something away from a show. That always makes me feel really, really good. And so, we've put out a financial literacy course that's free, that's for students and their parents, and we're creating a lot of content for free to try and create a message of financial literacy. And it feels incredibly rewarding to hear from people that we've made a difference for their family, for their business, for their kids, for something. And so I would say that's been the best. I have yet to be in the coffee shop and run into somebody going, "Hey, I saw you on that podcast." That happens from doing local television. Doing local television, people are like, "Hey, you're that guy." The difference is that being on television for all those years on Sunday morning news on NBC has never monetized. It has never created business in all these years, and podcasting has. So um, I would say while it's not purely altruistic, it has been joyful to know that we're making a difference for folks who might not be able to afford or find the resources otherwise. Jess, do you have you want to field that one too? The most
I
rewarding
mean,
part of what you do?
yeah, I just have to echo it. It's the opportunity to share value with people that, yeah, might not be able to afford you, right? Who hear a story and feel like, oh my gosh, like I can relate to them, like I get. And the longer I've been podcasting, the more I'll open up and share stuff on the podcast that I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. But those are the stories that people are like, that have the biggest impact.
Well, thank you for not doing any of that today, because this show is
It was the
all
right show
this
to
show
like.
is all ages, and we had to keep it clean today, Jess. Anything else, Sarah?
Yes. What, sorry, how do you know if your message is unique, or how do you choose a topic that will be unique to you?
Oh, I love that question. You want to go first?
Yes, I would love to. Well, first, I would just say, I know the question is your topic. I'm going to start by saying you are unique. So it's really just about making sure that we craft the topics that reflect the uniqueness that you are. Because I think a lot of times when I hear that question, it's like, I don't have something unique to share. And you do. You just need help from someone like me or Eric to pull that out of you, because I love the saying, like, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. And a lot of times you're inside your own world. You can't see the forest through the trees. I use sayings a lot that like aren't actually, they don't actually make sense, but I think that one does.
When in
You
Rome.
need you need somebody else to hear your story and like craft it for you. So I would say how to choose the right unique topic, like work with somebody else, like work with me, work with Eric, so we can help you like pull out what is truly unique and interesting about what you want to talk about.
I will piggyback off of that, because I agree with you completely. That some of it is just your authenticity. If you try to be someone you're not, it will not work anyway. So your unique voice is in fact your unique voice. Now, in terms of coming up with a show idea, and it did help to sit down with you all. When I came up with this, the first thing I did was Google it like crazy to see if there were 20 other firms already doing this, and there weren't. So that was nice. I also contacted our trademark attorney to find out, is there anything, are we going to run into something if we do this? And we found out that from a copyright and trademark standpoint, we weren't. So we went forward with that process and made sure that "Don't Retire, Graduate" was a trademark that's ours, and made sure that this whole concept could be unique and wouldn't be stolen. And more importantly, I guess, that it wouldn't be something that we put out there that belonged to somebody, and then next thing you know, we're the defendants, and that's bad too. So I think some of it is coming up and being yourself, and having a unique voice, and some of it is go online. There was a point in time where a couple of years ago, we changed the name of our firm, because it had been Brotman Financial for many, many years. And, we have 8 financial advisors. It's not about me. It's not my baby anymore. I'm not the only owner. There are principals or partners. So it was important to make some adjustments to that. And we looked at lots of different names, and we came up with some we liked. And we had our attorney look at it and go, you're going to run into trouble with this one and this one and this one, because they exist someplace. So I think it's important to be yourself and have your own voice. But then if you're going to put something out that is particularly if you're going to brand a show or a book or a course or something like that, make sure it doesn't already exist. Not all the good ideas are taken, believe it or not. They're out there. And the plan we had for rolling the book out, which was last October, the plan was to do a speaking tour, which of course in COVID didn't happen. And the plan was for me to come out for the talks in cap and gown, and to give the talk like it was a valedictorian speech, because I've never been a valedictorian. I'm not going to be. So on this, I get to be. And I was going to come out and address the audience like the graduating class. And I thought this was completely unique. No one is doing it. I bought a cap and gown, which are both uncomfortable and wildly hot. But I thought this would still be a neat thing, and it would be different. And if I ever do a speaking tour, that may still be part of my wardrobe at the time.
Yeah, I love it.
Sarah?
I've never spoken on camera or on radio. How do I know if this is something that I'm capable of?
Ooh, do I get to go first?
Go for
I
it.
get to go first on this one. Um, Sometimes public speaking is, to a lot of people, the most horrifying thing they ever have to do. I have not found radio to be that way, and podcasting without visual, which a lot of times it is just a phone call. It's much easier to be yourself when you're not looking at an audience. So you don't have to be a great public speaker or orator necessarily to have a lively conversation with somebody. Now, if it's a YouTube, if you're doing podcast and there's video, I think it helps to be in a comfortable spot. It helps by the time you put your headphones and your mic on, you're sort of hidden back here anyway. And it's really not as horrifying, but I think it will help to listen to yourself, record yourself, listen to yourself, find out if you're saying and ah all the time. Find out if you're emoting your own emotions, your own energy. And
Yeah.
if not, there are things you can do to be a better public speaker, but I don't want anyone to think that podcasting is the same as standing up in front of 500 people to give a talk. It's not. I'm one of those rare birds that likes doing that. And I know for some people, people have said they'd rather die than give a public talk, which I think is a little extreme. But I think test it. Do a screen test for yourself. Shoot some video of yourself. Figure out the lighting and what you want to wear. Figure out what you're comfortable, and then talk about things you really know. This is not a quiz. No one's going to stump you, and it's okay to say you don't know. If someone asks you a question, it's perfectly fine to say, I actually have no idea. Let's find out.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is if you're authentic, you don't have to be a public speaker or a great orator or some kind of celebrity or superstar to do this and do it well, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say you have to start, like, progress. Practice makes progress, right? There's no perfection. You get better and better every time. I remember the first time I did a podcast interview, the first time I started podcasting, I was way more stiff and nervous. It literally is something that you just have to start. You just have to start and practice.
Everyone told me that I would eventually look back on my first show and laugh at myself.
Yeah.
And I actually feel pretty good that my first guest ever 3 years ago was someone I knew really well, who was in studio right here. And we had a maiden voyage together and it worked fine. But to suggest that I knew what I was doing, I didn't. And I do think you get better at this over time. And I think it's okay to have some not go well, especially if your audience, if you have a show, even as a guest, and you don't feel like it went great, you don't have to share it with the people you do know. Yes, it's out there on the web, but ultimately, I don't think there's a great deal of risk that you're going to fall on your face and it's going to become some viral issue. That's just not the nature of this medium, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree.
So we have time for one more question if there is one.
One final question. Has there ever been a show that you went on that you thought was a great opportunity? And has there ever been a show you went on that you kind of wished you didn't?
Ooh, you want to take this one first? I'm so glad I don't have to go first on that one.
Yeah. There have been countless shows that were an amazing opportunity. I got to be a guest on Glambition Radio with Allie Brown, which is one of the, biggest podcasts for female entrepreneurs. We've gotten a lot of leads and clients from that. So there's been shows like that where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such an incredible opportunity. And there haven't been shows that I wish I didn't do, but there have been shows that I was like, eh. I'm a firm believer in, like, everything we've ever done or said or didn't do got us to where we are now. And this is where I want to be. So there's never been a show that, like, I regret doing. But of course, there's been shows that weren't as good as some other ones.
I would say that as a guest, I have learned to be more and more careful in terms of which shows I want, and Interview Connections has been helpful to us in sort of weeding out some of that, because there are a million shows and some of them are great and some of them are a little bit more amateur and maybe aren't what you want to do. I can't think of a single show that I did where I said, "Oh no, that's out there."
Mhm.
That's never happened. There have been shows that are kind of bigger that have, as I mentioned, gone viral. We had one show that was a YouTube, and I was a guest, and I didn't even know what the show was, but they had a huge audience, and we got close to 1,000 downloads of our ebook within a week, which is unbelievable. Like I couldn't have reached that many people with a blimp at the stadium. Like it just wasn't going to happen. So that's kind of amazing. I would also say from a sheer joy standpoint, we were contacted by Jean Chatzky from the Today Show from NBC, who wanted to guest on our show, and she's actually been a guest on Don't Retire, Graduate twice.
That's amazing.
And it was so cool to be the one interviewing a professional interviewer and a professional, in that space who couldn't be a nicer human. But we were talking about financial literacy and health savings accounts and things that we were both passionate about. And I had a chance to go up to the New York Stock Exchange and meet her for an HSA day launch. And it was just a really neat thing. And they found us.
Wow.
Well, that doesn't happen unless the show's out there. And I like all financial advisors. I like math. I like to look at numbers and you can't necessarily judge a show by its audience. A
Mhm.
show with 100,000 listeners who are barely listening isn't as good for you as a show with 500 who can't wait to hear the next word. And so it's not just about the math, but I would say getting started with this, it's amazing where it can take you. I sometimes laugh that I feel like Forrest Gump because the next place I'm going to wind up, I can't even believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And none of it's on purpose. All of it is just let's see where this takes us and let's do it. So we are out of time. If there are other questions that we didn't get to, I apologize for that, but you have our email addresses. We're both happy to answer them at any point. You can go onto either of our websites and schedule a consult for free and figure out whether either of our services are right for you. And with that, Jess, I can't thank you enough for being, you get to be our maiden voyage on this workshop.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate everyone for being here.
Continued success. Take care.